So the easiest way with history is to break it up into categories. We've talked about reading comprehension skills where you're looking at the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And for history, you always want to take it a step further and look at it as the 6 historical components or the 6 categories in history. For contemporary world issues, we're looking at the 21st century history. And for us, the 6 historical components are the acronym of SPICEE. The first one of SPICEE is social. And just as a throwback for you, for everybody who's studied feudalism with world history, if you haven't yet, you will. But with social, the definition of this is relating to the life, welfare, and relations of human beings in the community. Now, how we look at this in historical context is that we look at how a society interacts. For contemporary world issues, we'll be looking at social contract. For maybe your world history class, you'll be looking at hierarchies such as feudalism. You'll be looking at the rise of the middle class when you get to the Industrial Revolution. For contemporary world issues, we'll be looking at the dismantlement of the middle class with the Great Recession of 2008. So how to use social and historical context? You're looking at how society interacted, social engagements, social norms, and class structure. Our social norms being like how we interact with the society. How do we use our manners? We know that morally it is wrong to kill somebody, but how does everybody know that that's okay? And that's what we would refer to as a moral compass. And once again, I can't spell. There we go. Just to give you kind of a visual idea of what social is, just touching back on feudalism, is that structure of peasants at the bottom, then you have your lords, your knights, and later on Industrial Revolution, there'll be your workers, and then your management level, and then your CEOs and your stakeholders. For feudalism, it's peasants, the knights and lords, and then kind of your more noble class, and then of course the king, as stated in the mandate of heaven, divine right. So again, feudalism is the dominant social system in medieval Europe, which the nobility held lands from the crown in exchange for military service. In a way, it is sort of a social contract. Social contract stating that we give a little to gain a little from our government. We give up some of our rights, not a lot, but some of our rights in exchange for protection. An example of this is for any young man turning 18. When you're 18, you sign up for the draft. That doesn't mean you're going to automatically go to war, but just the event that your country needs you. We've seen this happen with World War II. We saw this happen again with Vietnam. What they'll do is, of course, they'll pay you. They'll give you money for college later on, and that's part of the social contract that we have currently still in place. The next part of SPICEE is political. A definition of political is your political events, ideas, movements, the organs of government. When we say organs of government, an easy way to think of this is our 3 branches of government that we have in America. We have the executive, and that's your president and vice president. Your legislative, that would be Congress, and Congress is split into 2. Your House of Representatives is based on the population of the state, and then the Senate has 2 representatives per state, and that's a throwback to the old Roman system. And then you have your judicial branch, which is your Supreme Court. Another part of politics is the voter, and we're going to be taking a look at voter history, the rise of the third-party candidate, especially with the 2000 election. We recently saw that again in this past election of 2016. Political parties and leaders, we're going to be looking at political parties of the past, and we'll be looking at political parties of today. Not just the Democrats and the Republicans, but we'll be looking at those independent, Greens, and other third-party affiliations as well. Of course, we need to look at global leaders, not just within America, but we're also going to be looking at diplomacy. We're going to be looking at foreign policy, war, because the 21st century has been defined by conflict. That's pretty much all of your Unit 8 right there. And laws will be sprinkled in throughout. So we'll be looking at different court cases, and we'll be looking at different laws and how those were implemented and how those are still retained for the 21st century. How to use the categorization of political in the historical context, we're looking at diplomatic sanctions. There are three types of sanctions. Diplomatic sanctions is always our first go-to. We want to be able to talk out our problem. If that doesn't work, if we cannot sit down and use our social norms of manners and kind of just working through a problem and finding a common ground, then our next move would be for economic sanctions. Because money makes the world go round, and that's sort of like a timeout for the country who kind of did the more wrong. They get an economic sanction. It's just kind of like an economic timeout. And then your third sanction is a military intervention or a military sanction, and that's where you have occupations going on. Always diplomacy first. Creation and need of laws, you're going to be taking a look at that, and that will be the basis of your Unit 4 project. Cause of conflict, that will be all about Unit 8. Government structure will be Unit 3. And of course, ideologies will be Unit 2 and throughout as well. An example of politics, especially with the 21st century, is the Brexit. And that's where England, or excuse me, the United Kingdom makes up of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And the United Kingdom, England being the dominant one. They put a vote in, and the majority of the citizens, it was very close, 50-50, but the majority of the citizens voted to leave the European Union. And that's just with an organization where they kind of are able to move within borders, have a solid currency. What we have in the United States between the states, they're trying to do more on a larger scale between countries. The problem with that is where within the United States, we have a similar culture, a similar social norm throughout all 50 states and our territories. When you try to implement the same idea with countries, you come into a point where you have a lot of cultural conflict, and that's going to create tension. So that's why the European Union is having a lot of issues right now. The United Kingdom voted on it in June of 2016, on June 23rd, and they were just like, we're done. We're out. Bye. Good luck. And then Scotland had earlier voted to, should they secede from the United Kingdom or not, and very close again, 50-50, but the majority ruled to stay with them. But so the meme that you see over here, the political cartoon, is England turning around and telling Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland to sit still. They can't leave. So we'll see. It's still all up in the air over there. The next part of SPICEE is intellectual. And the definition of that is abstract or tangible. When we say abstract, that's an idea someone came up with. For example, E equals mc squared from Einstein. The theory of relativity. For your math class, that would be Pythagoras theorem or Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem is what that's called. A tangible cognitive, what that means is an invention. The cotton gin, the computer. The internet is more abstract because you can't actually touch the internet, but the computer is tangible. The iPhone is tangible. Smartphones are tangible. Things that you can actually touch is what tangible is. Abstract is an idea that you really can't touch, but it's still there. It's still accepted by everybody, at least almost everybody. So an abstract or tangible cognitive that progress, intellect, and evolution or progress. It just means we propel ourselves forward intellectually. So how to use intellectual in the historical context as part of SPICEE. It's usually created out of necessity. With World War I, trench warfare, you saw a big necessity for long-range warfare, where before it was, you were using swords and you were right into each other's faces and it was very dirty and very bloody. With World War I, they put some distance in, and they did this because of the invention of the gun, and then later on with the machine gun that we're going to see come into play, tanks, bombs, the airplane, barbed wire, all makes, because of there's a necessity for more of what they would call a civilized warfare. Profound impact on human development. You are all children of the 21st century. You grew up with gaming consoles, you grew up with the internet, and so you will have a distinct cultural characteristic difference from that of your parents who came late into this technological revolution. They might have been teenagers, they might have been in college or grown by the time that this happened, what we would call the digital revolution of today. Whereas my own preschooler, he can access anything on my phone. He can just swipe it and put in the code. Whereas, I had to learn how to do that. And in turn, I had to turn around and teach my grandpa that too. So the digital revolution is changed from mechanical and analog electrical technology to digital electronics, which began anywhere from the late 1950s with the mass consumption of computers. That's where we start seeing that. In the late 1970s with the adoption of digital computers and digital recordings. Today, everything is recorded. Everything is captured, whether it's by smartphone or body cameras, whatever. Everything is captured nowadays, which is good for transparency. Culture, this is the fun part of our categories. Culture is your beliefs and social activities from one group to another, different ethnicities, religions, and nationalities. So how do we use culture in historical concepts? This is your customs, your religions, your traditions. Overall, the best definition of culture is the characteristics of people. The global kind of cultural identification of Americans, how everybody else sees Americans, is that we all wear blue jeans. We don't really think about it. Everybody really does wear blue jeans. When you go to Europe, you're always advised to dress like you were attending a nice dinner, or if you were going to maybe like to church or to a family gathering or something where you'd have to dress up a little bit better, business casual. They always tell the American tourists, do dress nicely because they don't want them running around in blue jeans. To us, that's normal. To Europeans, it's like, but why can't you put on something nice? So culture, working schedules, language, medical cures, religions, child rearing methods, food, folk art, celebrations like birthday parties, jokes, humor sometimes can be translated and sometimes it goes right over people's heads. Always use an emoji when you're texting. Manners, clothing and dress. So example, we see this currently would be like your food court at the mall. Snapchat selfie filters, Star Wars, things that can translate throughout. Economics, because money makes the world go round. Society uses limited resources, production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. The U.S. does not make much, but we are a big exporter of intellectual property. We are kind of number one in the filming industry. We do create a lot of the movies, a lot of the music. That's about it. We don't make much else anymore. We still make Etch-a-Sketch. So how do we use economic in the historical context? Revenue, meaning our paycheck, what we are earning. Sanctions, if we have to put somebody in a timeout. And of course, taxes. We will talk about Occupy Wall Street. That happened in 2011, 2012. And it was a movement of young people. They were very tired. So this came a lot from huge burdens of student loans, and they were very tired of not being able to pay off their student loans, not being able to get a job that would allow them to pay off their student loans. And lastly is our environment, and that is our human interaction with the natural world over time. We have accelerated our impact with the planet since the Industrial Revolution to the point where in August of every month the planet stops producing natural resources to meet human consumption, and then we would go on borrowed time, and it gets shorter and shorter every year. How we use the environment in historical context, an active role nature plays in influencing human affairs, short and long term. You see this with discussions on climate change, discussions on global warming. Recently, the Paris Agreement, that was just happened not too long ago, a few weeks ago, was kind of an agreement between countries to get together and how can we reverse the impact of what we're seeing from the Industrial Revolution that occurs today. One area that we're going to look at is China's smog problem. All right, and that's it for us. That is your 6 components of history. So just to recap on that, SPICEE, social, political, intellectual, cultural, economic, and environment. Those are your 6 categories of history. As you read, categorize them.